Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Careers Fair. We've got lots of interesting speakers for you today. So we're really looking forward to working with you. Myself and Marika, good morning, Marika,
Good morning.
are going to be hosting all of our speakers today. And we'll also obviously be sort of linking it all together. So we know some of you are students watching on your own device with your own account. If you are, please feel free to use the comments, which are over here somewhere, to ask any questions that you've got. We'd really appreciate to hear anything you want to ask. And there's no stupid questions. We've got speakers from lots of different things. You may not have heard of what they do, and I encourage you to ask. If you are a teacher this morning, you've got us big on your screen, just presenting out to the whole class, then we appreciate you won't be able to see the comments. So we'll be putting up a link that you can use to ask questions. Or if you want to, as a teacher, feel free for you to ask questions in the comments to the side on behalf of all the students in your class. And we also encourage you, teachers, feel free to pause. So this, you can pause it and then carry on. Obviously, you'll be a bit behind the live, but you can pause it, have a discussion about any of the interesting points that have come up. And then obviously carry on and play. And all of this is available on demand after through the same link that you've joined on today. So lots of ways to engage, and we'll keep on putting up little links and things below us. And you'll also see, if you've got access to the comments, that you can grab links from there as well. And we also appreciate from yesterday, I think we had a lot of speakers saying really interesting things about what they wanted to do. And I think for the students with your workbooks, so if you've got your workbook out in front of you, you'll want to make a note of little search terms, and we'll make available a list of all the links to all of the places you can find out more about the careers and opportunities that our speakers are talking about. So lots to take in. So feel free to pause, feel free to ask lots and lots of questions. To be honest, the more questions, the better. So I'm really excited to start off today by inviting in our first guest. So joining us this morning, first of all, we have Kate. Good morning, Kate. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Cool. So I'll pass over to Marika to ask you a few questions about what you do. But I think, first of all, who you work for.
Yes.
Yes. So I work for an organization called Getty Images. Most of you probably haven't heard of us, but if you have ever watched a TV program where you would see archive footage, for example, if you read newspapers online or old-fashioned on paper, if you see adverts in magazines or on billboards, there's a reasonably good chance that the photography that you're looking at comes from our organization. So Getty Images is effectively an archive of images and video and music that is used either for editorial purposes, so in other words, as news, or for creative purposes in advertising for what is subsequently used to sell stuff. And I work for that organization, have done for about just coming up for 6 years, and it's a fantastic place full of super creative people doing really awesome things on a daily basis.
Cool. So if anybody wanted to use the images that your photographers take, they need to come to you guys and ask for those images. Is that correct?
That is
Like,
correct.
how does that kind of work?
Yeah, well, there are many ways of doing it. We would prefer that people don't just download things off Google, and there are actually legal reasons why that's really not a good idea. But you can come to us and you can either buy or you can license. We don't actually give the content away. We don't give the images away. We license them for use, just as you would, for example, if you've got a Netflix subscription or an Amazon Prime subscription. You're not getting your film in perpetuity unless you hand over some money. You can rent it for a period of time, and it's exactly the same principle for the images. Our photographers are artists, and it's our job as an organization to protect their artistry, to give them a license fee for the content that they're producing so that they can afford to continue to produce it for us. So you come to our site, you either license via a subscription, or you can license a single image if that's what you want, and then you use it for the purposes that you wish, which might be advertising, It's a slightly different set of rules if you are using it for editorial purposes. And things like blogs and websites sort of sit somewhere in the middle ground there.
So sorry, Ben, go on.
No, after you, Marika, sorry.
I was just going to ask a bit more about your role. So what do you do? Are you an actual photographer, or what do you do for Getty Images?
I'm an amateur photographer. Lots of us in our organisation are amateur photographers. There's nothing that I've ever taken that would make it onto our website. It's not that good. But no, my job, I head up what's called sales enablement. And I guess to oversimplify massively, I am responsible for training the sales and the customer service organisation. So I have a team that is based globally. I have somebody in my team who's in Australia, somebody in London who's responsible for EMEA with me, and then I have 3 people in my team in the United States, and collectively we're responsible for training the whole of the sales organisation. That means creating training, it means delivering training, it means following up on training, and it means pretty much all points in between. So that means selling skills, presenting, negotiating. It might mean technical training. It could mean product training as well. And it's a great job. It's incredibly varied. Probably don't do the same thing, anything like more than 2 days running. And we have relationships with sellers and customer service agents all the way around the world. So literally tomorrow I'll be speaking first thing to somebody in Sydney. This evening I'll be talking to somebody in Seattle. And again, most days I speak to people at all points in between.
Sounds really interesting and varied. So I think there's a couple of things for the students to have a think about. So on your worksheets, there's a job that involves lots of different tasks. No 2 days are the same, as you say. I think that's really interesting for our young people to have a think about. Is that the type of job you really want, where it's never going to be the same? And that's the one that we might sort of latch onto there as well. So thank you for sharing on that one. Did you have to do any studying or training in particular for your role?
Probably nothing that would constitute study per se. So I did O-levels because I'm really old. That's what preceded GCSEs. And then I did A-levels, and then I went to university, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a bit. But I didn't do a university degree that's in any way related to the job that I do now, bar the fact that as an arts degree, you learn to write. You learn to write and communicate effectively. You have to be able to get an idea across. You have to be persuasive. You have to be able to convince. And that part I use on a daily basis. I have to write convincingly. I have to create training that people want to listen to. They have to then want to take it away and go and put it into practice when they get into the day job themselves. So that part I absolutely have used, as I say, on a daily basis. The skills that I've applied, the training, I guess, for the role is that before I trained salespeople, I was a salesperson. So again, it's a bit of a windy career. And again, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a few minutes. But when I left university, I went into human resources, HR as it's now called, or personnel as it was called then. And I moved after a couple of years, and I moved into sales. And I was in a sales role for getting on for 15 years, and I progressed through to managing a sales team before I moved into training salespeople to sell. So I guess my foundational training for the role is knowing what it takes to be a successful salesperson so that I can help other people to do the same thing.
That sounds really cool and really interesting. Can I ask, before you got into this role, what other previous roles did you do? And how did they help you in this role?
Yeah, so as I said, when I left university, the first role that I had was in HR, and that's quite different to selling. Apart from the fact that you do have to still engage with people on a daily basis, you have to build relationships, you have to be able to influence people, you have to be able to make a compelling argument. And when I decided that I wanted to move out of HR and into sales, and I went to a company with 0 sales experience, the thing I know that persuaded them to give me a chance was that I could tell them I could draw from HR what was also parallel and equivalent and important to be a successful salesperson, which is that ability to build relationships. So my first kind of sales job, I joined a company called Mars Confectionery. Those of you who are listening will know Mars bars and Snickers and Starburst. So I worked for them for about 7 years. And then I moved to another company called GlaxoSmithKline, and not on the pharma side, because they also have what's called a consumer healthcare business. And it's very similar to the Mars setup in that we were selling Ribena, Lucozade, Horlicks, same sales mechanism. So I worked there for 6 years. Then I left and I did a bit of working for myself. I worked as a consultant for 6 years, and I was based in France. Came back to the UK, joined Getty Images, and I'm still here.
Can I ask on the sales side of things? So there might be some students sort of maybe wondering, do I want to go into sales? Maybe there's a misconception a little bit about what that like goes. So what do you need to be?
Yeah.
What do you need to be good at for sales?
I'm completely honest with you. When I was at university, if somebody had said, "Have you considered sales?" I would have said, "Not a chance." Because in my head, my own perception was double glazing, foot in the door, have I got a deal for you, which is very much not my personality. And yet when I joined Mars, their approach to training people to sell, and there is a way to sell, was that you have to be organized, you have to be methodical, you have to be quite analytical. You also have to be able to build a relationship. It is absolutely not, well, in some sales scenarios, it's a one and done. So I'll sell you a car, I'll probably never see you again. It might just be about the price, although even then, not always, because you want them to come back, for example, to service your car. So you need to build some kind of a relationship. But that ability is far more important than the kind of, I guess, the stereotypical idea that sellers are all aggressive and, that's just not the way that most buyers want to buy. So, as I say, it's much more about relationships. It's much more about being able to build trust. It's much more about being credible. And that means knowing your products really well than it is about, as I say, that stereotype. And I was swayed by the stereotype before I moved into it. And now I spend a lot of time when I'm training people saying, forget all that. That is absolutely not what's going to make you a successful seller.
I think sometimes maybe the apprentice as well kind of gives people the impression that like I could do sales.
I think a lot of us, who were would call ourselves sales professionals, watch programs like that and shout at the TV, because it's just, again, it's so divorced from the way that we would train people to sell. Now, that's not to say there aren't some people who are very successful at selling on personality, but they tend to be a very, very small number of people. And there are just as many people who sell through being, as I say, being creative, analytical, persuasive, trust building. There is not one, there's a methodology that works, but not all people are the same.
Really good message for our young people to get down. And obviously, I might reference the worksheets if you've got those in front of you, if you're in the classroom setting, that what sales is might be a really nice thing to kind of get in there and make sure you realise sales doesn't have to be as we see on the TV.
No, and the other thing that I would say that I think I've sort of arrived at over the years is that almost no matter what career you choose to do, at some level, you will sell yourself. You have to be able to sell yourself when you go into an interview. Whether you're a doctor, whether you're an architect, whether whatever career you choose, ultimately, you're selling yourself. So that ability to show people why they should speak to you, why they should employ you over all the other people that they might be seeing in that particular occasion is, that's still really important. You have to be able to be credible and influential and, good eye contact, all of that kind of stuff. It still applies. So there's a lot about the principles of selling that are really vital, I would say.
Yeah, I great message to get down on that one. So, if we sort of take it from obviously your role around sales, are there any, you've talked about obviously relationships. So I think we've kind of covered in most senses what knowledge and skills are essential, but are there any others that you would add?
Well, yes, because the knowledge and skills that I've talked about are specifically for sales. The industry that is kind of photography, and in our particular industry, which is the licensing of photography. If you are a photographer, there are some basic skills that you need to have. You need to be able to take a great picture. You have to also know what people want. So our photographers work with we have a creative team, and they spend a lot of time researching our website. So they're analyzing data. Again, it's not just the pictures. They analyze the download data, and they can say at any one period of time what images are most popular with our customers. And what they will then do is go to photographers and say, we don't have enough images that look like this, or that are covering this theme. So for example, right now, the big themes are diversity, surprise, surprise, their sustainability, their inclusion. And so we are trying to make sure that our photographers are creating content that we know people want to license. And then on the editorial side, it's slightly different because we're driven by the news of the day. So at the moment, the pandemic, our sport and entertainment business took a real hit last year. As you can imagine, the Olympics was postponed, the Euros was postponed, the sport, Premier League, empty stadium. So that's starting to come back this year. But as I say, we go where the news is on the editorial side. And then, as with any business, there's a whole bunch of roles in between the product and the customer. There's my team, there's marketing, there's human resources, there's finance, there's legal. And it's then about, the skills that you have for that particular role and using it in a business like ours, which is really creative, it's really fun. We have some really great people. And, and what I really like about our business is at the senior leadership level, a real willingness to listen to feedback and listen to input from the people that are employed.
Cool. Can I ask, if thinking back to your kind of teenage years, if there's one bit of advice you could give yourself knowing what you know now, what would that be?
Well, if it was I think one bit would be, or maybe two. Number one, I would say your career is very unlikely to take a linear route. I'm the child of two medics. So my dad was a doctor, my mum was a physiotherapist, and both of them my dad was immigrated into the country in the 60s, and my mum was the child of an immigrant. So for them, it was all about get a job that is safe and secure. And so they did that job till they retired. And I think if you're in a profession, I can see that maybe is still the case. But for me, my career path has been much more windy, and I think I'm okay with that. And I would say to anybody, don't feel that the job that you do when you leave college or university is necessarily the job that you'll do when you retire. Be open to change, and if it doesn't make you happy, because goodness knows you're going to be doing it for a really long time, change it. Change it. And the other thing, just I guess allied to that, is don't necessarily feel that you have to do the job that your parents would like you to do. I mean, my dad, even before he died, and that was only a couple of years ago, said it's not too late to go and be a doctor. And I've been working for nearly 20 years. So, you do what makes you happy.
I love that. Be open to change and don't do what your parents kind of expect you to do. That's a really nice message. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's a nice message. But be open to change.
Not necessarily. Yeah.
Absolutely perfect advice to kind of wrap up on. We could talk for a very long time. Actually, one thing I just quickly wanted to bring in is an example for everyone of the type of images that your photographers produce. And this particular one, which we're just going to bring in now, it won a Pulitzer Prize, which is a journalism prize, a very prestigious one. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, that's right. So just to give you an example, some of you may have seen this image. So a couple of years ago, there was a lot, and still is a lot, in the news in the US about the immigration across the Mexican-US border. And John Moore, who's one of our photographers, actually camped out for 6 months with the border guards at the border. So he was watching the immigration happening. And in this particular instance, the lady that in fact, you don't even see the mother. She was being arrested by the border guards. And it's the picture, I mean, it still gets me going even now, the picture of her daughter, who is like 2.5, who obviously doesn't understand what's going on. And it was just such a powerful image that it just totally summed up what was going on at that moment. And it's credited with changing opinion in the US because it really brought to life the human side of this ongoing debate about whether immigration is or illegal immigration is to be stopped and how. So just a really powerful example of how photography can change lives. And yeah, I'm very proud to say he's one of our photographers.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, we had a question come in from one of the students during the session, which was this: how does your job affect the world? And I think that is probably the best way of demonstrating that.
Yeah, exactly. Our motto, if you like, for the organisation is "We move the world through imagery." And yeah, I mean, you know, if you get a chance, go have a look on the Getty Images website. I know the links are going to be shared afterwards, but there's a lot of them that you literally you find yourself going, oh my God, that's incredible. And that's the reaction that our photographers are seeking to produce, because they know that it changes people's minds and in some cases makes them act differently. And you can't really say fairer than that. And yeah, it makes me very proud to see that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think lots for the students to take in and have a think about. Search for Getty Images if you want to find out more as a starting point, and we will send out some more links through your teachers if you signed up as a school, or individually if you signed up. We'll be sending out some information that you'll be able to access to. Thank you, Kate. Really appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure.
If you're around, I know there's a few more questions that the students have posted if you're around later, but otherwise we can send those on to you. Thank you so much.
I'll hang around. See you soon.
Awesome. That was really interesting. So, teachers, if you want to pause at that point and have a chat with the class that you've got, then please feel free to do that. And you can take a moment to reflect on what Kate had to say about Getty Images, her role, and the role of her wider organisation. What we're going to do now is we're going to introduce our second speaker for today. So I'd like to introduce Ranran. Good morning, Ranran. How are you?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm very good. Hope everyone's well.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
So I suppose we better pass over to you to. I believe you're going to present your screen. So I'll bring that in a moment, and we can find out about you and your organisation and your role.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. If you want to switch to your slides, I'll bring your screen in now.
Okay.
Great stuff. Remember to keep your questions coming, everyone. And we've got some great ones coming on the form. And I'll put the link to that in the bottom of the screen at the moment. Okay. Over to you, Ranran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ranran. Thank you very much for listening in this morning. I'm a landscape architect working for a company called BDP. We're an international practice of architects, designers, engineers, and urbanists. This year, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary. So what is landscape architecture? I would say it's a rewarding profession. It's a niche profession. You might probably not have heard of it yet. So it combines art and the environment together. Architects design buildings and we design everything outside of them, such as public squares and plazas, parks, streetscape, residential and mixed-use neighborhoods, playgrounds and roof terraces. And the scales projects could be, a few square meters to 10,000 of hectares. So within the profession, one may wish to choose to specialize either in design or management or landscape planning or landscape science. Now, I would like to share with you a few exciting projects that me and my colleagues have worked on since I joined BDP. Bear in mind that none of the projects would be able to be delivered by one person. Teamwork is very important. So this is the Parliament Restoration and Renewal project. And from landscape point of view, we were asked to look at how to improve the streetscapes around the Parliament estate, as well as looking at inside of the estate, how to make the space more functional and pleasing. This is a project in Fuzhou, China. It's a hospital design, and the landscape team delivered the external areas, internal courtyards, multiple roof terraces, and they all correspond to different buildings functions and also to the users. So that would be patients and medical staff and visitors. This is a 5-star hotel project I'm working on with my colleagues in West London at the moment. It's on site, so it's being built. We're delivering the external entrances to the hotel, a central drop-off courtyard, again, multiple roof terraces for the guests and restaurants, facade greening, and also biodiversity roofs to boost the ecology. This is a competition my colleagues worked on. So the square is the second biggest urban square in the city, and the brief was to look at how to make it more impressive. Oxford Street improvement. You might have seen this on the news. So this project came out basically during the pandemic last year, and we were asked to look at how to greening the street, make it more user-friendly. And we're introducing a lot of flowering trees and species and fun planters and more visual pleasing environment for everyone. So how did I get into the profession? I grew up in Beijing, China, and I studied a year in economy university in the city, and then I decided to transfer to St. Francis Xavier University in Canada. While I was studying my business degree, I knew I always had a passion towards fine arts. So then I did a lot of classes in art, and I obtained a minor in studio art. And then I decided to do something about it by studying graphic design at the art college after my bachelor's degree. And while I was doing an internship in a graphic design company, the owner was actually a landscape architect. So we had multiple chats, and he was asking me what kind of passions I had. And I was saying, oh, I love art, but I'm also very conscious about the environment and climate change. And he said, oh, actually, landscape architecture sounds like maybe a suitable career for you. And then I did some more research on it, and I decided to study landscape architecture in England. So I went to Sheffield. So it is a diverse profession. It does welcome people who have various interests. I'd say if you cared about the environment, you're interested in sustainability or plants or biodiversity, if you like building things, art, if you like history or design or culture, this profession might be the one for you. But as you can tell, what I would say is my path wasn't linear. I did change my mind there a few times. So don't be afraid of changing your mind as well, exploring what's out there. But if you are getting to know the profession more and deciding that would be something you'd like to study, there are many university courses in the UK as well as abroad you can do. And typically after you done your bachelor's degree in the UK, you would work in a practice for a year or two, and then you would go back to get your master's degree, and then after you started working for a number of years, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, then you enroll and take the pathway to chartership exam to become a chartered landscape architect in the UK. So the profession has taken me to many places in the world. My first job was in Glasgow, and I left Scotland, and then I decided to move to Doha, Qatar, and I got to know a lot about the Middle Eastern culture. But because I wanted to continue my pathway to chartership and become chartered landscape architect, I decided to move back to England a few years ago, and now I work for BDP in our London studio. So just a few images of places I grew up and I lived in and worked in. So the three essential skills I'd say for the role, the first one would be creativity. I think it's one of the reasons that why a lot of people choose to become a designer. So at work, we do quite a lot of hand sketching. We use 3D modeling to create spaces to communicate our ideas. And we use quite a lot of different softwares. So this is a Photoshop plan to convey our design ideas. And the second one is communication and collaboration. As I said before, teamwork is essential. We often, on a daily basis, we communicate with colleagues to brainstorm ideas and design. And we also do quite a lot of presentations to express your ideas to clients and the council and stakeholders. So both verbal and graphic communications is very important. This is a CGI image render to show what the space would look like after build. We also do both 3D modeling using software as well as physical modeling. So last but not least, I would say attention to detail is very important as we, do draw, plan, design things, and eventually they get built. So we draw plans and construction details in millimeters, and then they get built on site by contractors, and we do visit the site and check up the works periodically. So all the elements come together with patience and attention to detail during the construction stage. So beautiful bench detailing. There's a photo of me and my colleague went to a planting nursery to check out the plants the clients have bought to make sure they're in good health. So I do feel I have been extremely lucky to work on so many projects in different scales, in different countries, problem solving and designing spaces and places, then they get built and enjoyed by people do make me feel very proud. And I feel I'm, contributing to making our environment healthier and better. So as a teenager, I definitely wish I knew, as Kate said before, there are so many career options out there, and events like this is brilliant. I would suggest you attend as many as possible to find out what's out there and what's possible. So if you'd like to know more about landscape architecture, please do feel free to drop me a line, my email at the bottom of the page. But otherwise, Landscape Institute is the professional governing body. So when we become chartered, so that's where we would need to enroll our chartership studies, and then we would register with. So they have a lot of information about the profession, and also they have information about all the accredited courses in the universities in the UK. And also prospects have a page on the profession as well. So finally, I would like to finish my talk today with a quote from Nelson Mandela. There is no passion to be found playing small in settling for a life that is less than the one you're capable of living. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. If you got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, and a wonderful quote to end on as well. So the 2 links that were shared have gone into the comments. So again, teachers, if you're watching full screen, just over this side, if you come out of that, you'll be able to access those links. And we're also going to be sharing all of the slides with the links post this session as well. So you can pick them up there. For the students, I think some really interesting things around traveling with work, about the creative and varied nature. I think all of the different projects that you said you'd be able to work on, I think that's something that might spark the interest. So if you want to have a varied traveling existence for your working career, maybe looking at this world of architecture, landscaping. And I feel, Ranan, that this is obviously something that is more common, I presume, in the building industry, is to combine buildings with landscape and make it a lot more, whether it's sustainable or whether it's obviously environmentally friendly. I assume that's a big part of the design process for you now.
Yes, definitely. We do work with interdisciplinary design team consultants daily. So that includes architects, engineers, and planners, ecologists. So many interlinked professions. And when you have a site, it's either buildings being dominant. There are quite a few buildings, and then landscape being like external areas and roof terraces, or you might have a site that is majority landscape design with a few buildings inside. But I guess sustainability is kind of the backbone of everything we do. So there's like a whole huge topic about sustainability as well in our career.
Yeah, and that might be something that we asked the students during your talk what they're passionate about, because you talked about the things that would lead to your passions. So hopefully some of their passion areas, whether that is sustainability, they're concerned about climate change, there's roles for that as well. Thank you so much for your time. You. If you're available towards the end of the session, there are a few questions we'd like to add to pass to you then. But otherwise we can pass those on. But just a massive thank you for your time and sharing your really interesting career with everyone today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'll see you shortly.
Thank you very much. Okay. Absolute pleasure. Okay. I have a civil engineering background, so that was doubly interesting for me, as I did a civil engineering degree. So I would be the person that would take those designs and figure out how to physically make it work. And then Raman talked about the contractors on site that would physically put it in place and kind of bring the vision to life. It's a really interesting area for me. Anyway. Okay, Marika, we have Aaliyah next, I believe.
We do.
Cool. So I'm going to welcome Aaliyah in. Good morning. How are you?
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
So, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and what you do, and then, be really interested to hear what that is.
All right, I'm a barrister. A barrister is a type of lawyer. There are 2 main legal professions. Most lawyers are either barristers or solicitors. There's a couple of other situations. You can have a chartered legal exec, or you can have a legal secretary, which is not quite legal, but kind of legal adjacent. But I'm a barrister. It's a specific profession, so I mainly focus on advocacy. That means I go to court and present my client's case as and when that's necessary, and I kind of focus on litigation and trials, and I'm instructed by solicitors who do more of the client management.
I love that you just answered something I was about to ask. Like, what's the difference between a solicitor and a barrister? And I was waiting, like, okay, so now I know. Sorry.
Sure. So what does my role involve? Well, it kind of really varies. I'm a personal injury barrister because I specialize in a particular area of law. Some people specialize in, there's all sorts of different types of law to specialize in. Some people do a much broader range. But you can be a criminal barrister. That's the kind of barrister that you'll have seen on the TV in their wigs and gowns, asking for guilty verdicts and that kind of thing. Other people specialise in family law, so they deal with disputes over whether children need to be in care, or over divorces and that kind of thing. Other people are commercial barristers, or at the moment, kind of relevant to what's happening at the moment, you could have an intellectual property barrister who specialises in, for example, the intellectual property of vaccines, that kind of thing. So all the kind of different areas in which kind of life happens, there is normally some kind of legal regulation, and lawyers get involved at one point or another. The bit that I do, I find really interesting because it involves working with people, what happens in their lives. I mean, normally it's when things have gone wrong for them. Unfortunately, that part of being a lawyer is often that you turn up when things have gone wrong in people's lives. But I work with people who've been injured maybe at work or in road traffic accidents or on holiday, all sorts of different situations, and figure out ways. Normally I act for claimants, so figure out ways for them to get compensation to look after themselves now that they've been injured or their lives have been changed, that kind of thing.
Cool. So you mentioned being in court at times. Obviously not everyone in the law profession spends a lot of time in court, as I understand it.
Yeah.
How much of your time is spent in court? How much outside?
So it really varies. I don't go to court very often at all now, probably once a week, if that. And with all the kind of stuff that's happening in lockdown, I mean, life has changed so much. So with lockdown, a lot of my court is just like this. It's me sitting in front of a computer talking into a camera. Before it was kind of trooping off around the country and dressing up and so on. But it really varies. So like when I first started, I was in court every single day, traveling around the country on like really minor trials, but kind of getting like my advocacy wings ready and meeting lots of people, getting lots of experience. If you are a criminal barrister, you're probably in court most days. If you're a tax barrister, for example, you don't go to court very often. And what I do when I'm not in court is, again, this in front of a computer, either having conferences with clients or doing legal research and writing legal advice. So there's a lot of time spent reading and writing. It's a big part of being a lawyer.
So just about to answer that.
Yeah, right. We're very, very neatly connected now. The question is obviously, how did you get to that point? What training and studying did you have to do?
Yeah, so being a lawyer is quite a formal profession. So you pretty much need to have a degree. There's the odd exception, but your normal way of qualifying is to get a degree. I have a law degree. You don't have to have a law degree. It's just what I thought I wanted to do when I was 17. You then need to, as a barrister, take what we call, I think it's now called a bar training course. It has various different names, but basically a 1-year course in which you learn advocacy skills and you learn kind of procedural rules. I did a master's as well because I thought it would be interesting and I thought it would be a good CV booster. You definitely don't need to have one to be a barrister. It just worked for me at the time. If you have done a non-law degree, before you can do the bar course, you do what we call a GDL, a law conversion course. So you basically pack lots of law into 1 year. You've got to have those qualifications. Being a lawyer is a pretty academic job, so you've got to have those academic qualifications. And it's definitely true that the better the university you go to, that there's a bit of nuance in that, but the better the university you go to, the easier it will be to get into what is quite an academic job.
I think that's a really interesting point, and maybe actually just a note for the teachers and the students watching in the classroom with your workbooks. We've obviously seen some people talk about they did a degree, but it wasn't relevant for their job. And this is obviously one where if you're really interested in law, there's a degree to be done along the way. So useful one for the workbook for everyone. Thank you for sharing that bit. In terms of our next question, obviously you talked about your qualifications, but there's more than qualifications. What skills and knowledge are essential?
What was really interesting was listening to Kate, because some of the things she said were really vital for mine as well. So I suppose one of the takeaways is that you don't have to decide to be a lawyer in this. I happened to want to do it when I was younger, and then I happened to like it. You definitely don't have to decide. I know people who have been doctors first, who have done all sorts of different jobs before they wanted to become a lawyer. So lots of the skills are transferable. One of them is advocacy skills. My job is to persuade a court of my client's case. So I need to be good at both oral advocacy, so giving a speech, again, like you'd see on the TV, trying to persuade someone of something, but also written advocacy. I need to be able to write clearly and write in order to persuade someone of a point of view. So that's basically the most important skill. Another big one is analytical skills. You need to be able to, I get lots of evidence and lots of information from my clients. I need to be able to analyze that and figure out what it means, what kind of arguments I can put together from that, what the strength of my case is. So that's the kind of, like, those are skills. Maybe the advocacy is more of an arts kind of thing, so from your English and your history from writing, but actually the analytical stuff can be very scientific and kind of almost mathematical. It can be pretty logical. So you can use a whole range of like your school subjects when you become a lawyer. And then also you need legal knowledge. So that's why you have to do the qualifications. You either do a law degree or you do a law conversion. One thing I might also say about being a lawyer is you probably have to have a good memory. There's a lot of facts, there's a lot of things to kind of deploy. So probably a kind of underlying skill is just having a pretty decent memory at holding all of the stuff in your mind. But you can learn how to do that. There's ways to train yourself.
Can I just quickly ask, is something like public speaking a skill that, when I say public speaking, so I'm thinking about it, and some young people that might be on the call might be just like, okay, cool, I can argue a point, so I can be a lawyer if I can argue, but you need to kind of do that convincingly and well.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of really varies, I think, because it's not public speaking to 200 people. If it's even in court, it's maximum, I don't know, half a dozen people. So, or not maximum, normally it's only half a dozen people. So it's your ability to communicate, I guess, kind of almost like in a classroom setting is what you need. You don't need to be able to, give a speech, but you do need to be able to not feel nervous about communicating clearly, I think. But again, it kind of, once you've kind of trained to do something, all of that comes a lot more easily, I think. Then it's not something you just have to naturally have. You're training to have the skills to be confident in speaking in public.
Yeah, I think really good point to make a note of there. Like, I like to discuss things versus sort of getting your point across and the different bits there. I know a lot of schools do kind of mock trials. I don't know if you ever did something similar when you were at school,
yeah.
or like, is that a useful way to get an experience of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I did a mock trial. I can't remember who ran it at the time, and who knows whether they're still running it because it's some time ago now. But yeah, it's a great way of figuring out. I mean, it's not the same, but it's a great way of figuring out whether it's something that interests you. I think a fair few universities also do kind of law summer schools or kind of 2-week courses. Go on that, see what you think. And also get work experience, write to firms and see whether they'll host you for a couple of weeks. I, again, did that when I was 15. I went into a criminal defence firm and trooped off to court, and it was all very exciting, really interesting. So yeah, there's all sorts of different things that you can do to see whether it's something that you might find interesting in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. So when I was a teacher, our school used to do that, and there was always a lot of positive feedback from that experience. I think it definitely helped a lot of the students. So thank you for sharing on that one as well. Okay. Yes, Marika.
Sorry, I just want to know, like, in terms of first of all, how long have you been a lawyer, a barrister, and what would you say is your proudest moment?
I qualified in 2012, so almost a decade now, which is scary. So I went straight through. Not everyone does, and it's why I just didn't really have any ideas for other jobs I wanted to do, and I liked this one. So I started working as a lawyer in my early 20s. For me, and the reason why I do the area of law I do, it's because it feels like it genuinely helps people. And I know that sounds incredibly cheesy, but sometimes I work for people who are very, very badly disabled because of accidents that have happened to them. So for me, winning a case for somebody, which means that they can, buy a house that is a bungalow so that their wheelchair can get around it, or buy a car that they can put their wheelchair in so that they can then drive to the seaside for a day holiday. That kind of thing is, I think, the best part of my job. But definitely going to court, having a long case and winning at the end is just incredibly satisfying. It's good to win for your client, but it's good to have a win.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that one, isn't it? Awesome. We're running towards the end of our time. So I think probably one question left to ask is, as a teenager, what do you wish you knew? What would you tell your teenage self?
I have so many things to tell them. No. Okay. From a careers point of view, my best advice is do what you are best, or do what interests you, because you will be best at that. So I remember as a teenager, I would have people saying you should do this subject because people will find it impressive, or you should do that because it'll be most useful. The reality is you'll always do what you like better, because you won't have to force yourself to do it. And then what you like is probably what you're going to want to do in the future. So don't, do a maths A level because somebody tells you it's going to be useful, because you're probably not going to want to be a statistician if you didn't even like the maths A level. Or don't do English because somebody tells you it's good for your writing, when actually your real passion is, classical civilizations or something. Do what you really like, and then you'll figure out from that what you want to carry on doing, I think.
Superb advice, and it's been echoed by a lot of our speakers as well. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I can see a few questions coming in, so if you are around to join back after our next speaker, that'd be amazing, and we can put a few of those additional questions to you. Thank you so much to everyone putting the questions in, and obviously, Elia, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you hopefully in a few moments' time. Okay, so just before we go to our next speaker, I just want to remind everybody about the chance to win a £50 Amazon voucher. So if you are contributing to the comments and the feedback, you will be in with the chance of winning one of 6 £50 Amazon vouchers. So we're just looking to give those to the people who are contributing lots and lots, asking lots of great questions, and I can already see a few front runners who've been contributing throughout. Equally for teachers, if you want to submit obviously on behalf of your class, then we can make that available, and maybe you can allocate it as you see fit. I hope I haven't caused too much of a riot in all of your classrooms right now with like, me, I've got a question.
I was going to say, does the teacher get the voucher or
No, of course not. Teachers do it for free. They love it, and they would never want to sort of gain anything from the extra units. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to bring in our next guest, who is Dr. Matthew Appleby. Are you ready for us, Matthew? I can see that you are. Welcome. How are you doing?
Hello.
I'm okay. Lovely to see you all here.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy day, so I'll sort of pass over to you in a moment to introduce yourself, what you do, and I know we've also got an interesting journey to explore as well to where you're at today. Matt, what is your role and what do you do?
I'm a doctor, so if anyone bursts in a minute whilst we're doing this, please I do apologise in advance. So I'm a doctor, an NHS doctor. I put up front that I'm a clinical researcher. Primarily, I work as a day in, day out doctor, but I work a lot in clinical research. Clinical research is basically research. You're investigating things. You can be a researcher in lots and lots of different disciplines. You can be a researcher in social sciences, in psychology, in maths, and I'm a clinical researcher. So I investigate things that usually involve human beings, and usually, sadly, when things go wrong with people. So I've worked for many years as a doctor, and then started to work more and more in research for conditions that don't have any treatments. So sadly, there are lots of conditions out there that we don't have many treatments for, and the consequence of which is that people like myself get the opportunity to go and find out about how we can treat people with some pretty life-limiting and often very sadly terminal, which means end-of-life diseases. And that's I do all the things you would normally expect a doctor to do: listen to heart and lungs, check people's nerves are okay, do blood tests. But I get to do other exciting things, like look to see whether new molecules and new products are improving people's memory, whether it's helping their movements if they have a disease like Parkinson's disease or motor neurone disease. And it's fun because I get to spend a lot more time than most people. I know lots of people in this audience have experienced, going to hospital, going to see their GP, and one of the problems is that sadly we have limited resources, especially at the moment, especially with things like COVID, and so the amount of time that you get to spend with your patients can be limited. And the great thing about my job is I can spend I can get to spend 45 minutes with a patient. We get to go through all of the things that are going on, the medical problems, and sometimes just talking about how things are at home, and then also get to do lots of interesting scientific research with them.
In addition, so you've got the clinical research part, but you say you do day-to-day doctor stuff.
Yes.
Have you always been in the clinical research? Like, have you had other roles in medicine as well?
No, absolutely. So, that kind of links onto the journey. So, primarily I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor who works in the NHS, and to become a doctor, you obviously have to go through medical school, but then you hear this word which is called a trainee. And you're actually already a doctor. So people are always talking about junior doctors and trainee doctors, but that's what they mean is that every form of doctor, which should go on for about 10 years, every form of doctor before you become a consultant, which is the kind of at the very end of the training process. And so I suppose if you're interested in a career in medicine, it's a huge, broad career. There are so many different things. It's not just, are you interested in brains? Are you interested in hearts? Are you interested in lungs? There's also, public health. There's infection. There's, pediatrics. There's obstetric and gynecology. And part of being a good and competent doctor is rotating through all those different disciplines. So I have been, you would have been lucky enough to see me on Christmas Eve in A&E. You would have been lucky enough to see me, doing my time in general practice, in surgery, in all of these different disciplines, which is fantastic because it gives you an opportunity to see everything that's out there, which is brilliant. But it also means that it's hard work. You have to kind of learn, almost a new discipline, from scratch every 6 months. But that's how, and it's actually not typical. Lots of other countries don't do that. You specialize very early, which means that's great. You get to decide that you're a neurologist at the age of 25. Personally, I at 25 didn't even know I wanted to be a doctor, let alone that I wanted to work in neurology. So it gives the opportunity to experience these different things, and some of them are quite an experience.
Yes, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I'm sure the students would love to hear the grisly details, but maybe we'll spare them on this occasion.
There are plenty of books out there. There are lots of people writing. Adam Kay's written a book that you can go read it there.
Can I ask? You said about studying at medical school. Like, how long was that, and what kept your interest? Because I believe it's quite long.
Yeah, so medical school. So so as a graduate, there are graduate schemes of medical school. So I was actually a graduate when I went to medical school, and you can do that in 4 or 5 years. Most medical schools, it's 5 years, and that is a long time. And obviously, that's you have to think about that financially as well. Obviously, there is you get the student loan, but people like me, I moved back in with my parents. I didn't live with I didn't live out with friends. I made the decision to move in with my parents and keep the costs down, and I did medical school in 5 years. It is a long slog, but all I can say is, and I'm fine with describing it as a slog, because it is 5 years. Honestly, I wouldn't want to try and do it in much less. There's so much information that you've got to learn and be capable and able to recall, that to just cram it all in a short period of time would be really difficult.
So you mentioned at 25 you didn't even know you wanted to be a doctor. Really interesting point, and I think something for a lot of the young people watching to understand is it's okay to not know what you want to do if you're 13, 14, 15, 16. Most of us didn't. But it leads us to the question, what were you doing from school to when you did your graduate medical course? What different roles have you had?
So I think I'm like echoing a lot of what people previously said, but a lot of the previous speakers were probably more accomplished than me in their younger days. I unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but I kind of wish I had paid more attention. My GCSEs weren't fantastic. I was, I cared a lot about what people were doing in the evening, what else was going on, what was happening in the weekend. And I didn't really achieve my potential. And I went to university and studied a degree that I started a degree that I wasn't particularly interested in. I just went to university because I wanted to, experience university. And those aren't necessarily the best reasons to go and start a degree, because you want to see what all the fun is about. And I actually left university after my first year and went to work. And I got various jobs, not particularly exciting jobs, but gave me time and opportunity to sit and think, okay, what do I actually want to do? Because the problem was that I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. And so I was doing things, I think the previous speaker had said, because people had said, well, that's the good thing to do because employers will like that. And so I kind of lost my path. I certainly didn't want to be a doctor. And I don't think that I had the discipline at the age of 18 to go into medical school. I was still, not mature enough. I needed to do a bit of growing up. And it wasn't until I had gone and I had worked and I'd done a whole load of different, various office jobs, nothing exciting, nothing particularly interesting. And I thought, and I looked, what degree would interest me? What would I actually do? And I knew that I was interested in psychology. I'd never done it at school, but I knew that those were the things that interested me in books. And so I did a psychology degree. I went to the same university that my girlfriend was going to. So it shows you that I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was like, well, I'll go to the same one that my girlfriend at the time was going to. And I did a psychology degree. But the most important thing, the take-home bit, was I was really interested. I had firstly grown up, so I was paying attention to what was being said in class. I was really interested in the subject matter, which was like the first time ever that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so interested in what we're discussing and what we're doing. And that was just so liberating, to do something that you were really interested in. It makes all the working in the evenings and the nights so much easier. It makes paying attention in class and not focusing on, I wonder what someone's saying on whatever social media, that I actually just want to listen and talk about what we're doing. And I did really well. And it was the first time I'd ever done really well. I did really, really well in my degree. And it was just because I was 21. I was older than the other people in the class, not by a huge amount, but I was older. And I was just really into it. And I think, that's what's been said previously. After that, I took a break and did what many people do, actually, either before uni or after uni. And I did some volunteering, and I was volunteering overseas in the Middle East. And, part of the volunteering had a kind of, strong medical aspect to it. And I was like, gosh, this is interesting. Psychology was interesting. Did I want to go into kind of clinical psychology? Did I want to be a psychologist? And I was looking at it, it had woken up this whole kind of, maybe sciencey aspect in me. And I thought, well, no, actually, maybe medicine, maybe, I'd be really interested in medicine. I remember, I was looking at age 25 going, I'll do medicine. And I had to go back to, I didn't have the right A levels. I had to go back to sixth form college. I had to be tutored by one of my friends who's an excellent, past history as an excellent maths teacher, But I went back to sixth form college to do my A levels. But I remember just the people at the interviews for medical school were so impressed that I would go back, and I didn't care. Honestly, A levels are not that difficult if you just have your head screwed on. I know that's maybe sound like the easy thing to say, but I was just sitting there in a class with people who were 18, and they were kind of looking at me like, why is this guy in his mid-20s in our class? But I just didn't mind. You're just older, you just don't care, and you just go home, do the work in the evening. Chemistry A level isn't that fascinating, but it was so much easier in my mid-20s than trying to do chemistry at GCSE when I was 16, because I was actually wanted to do the thing. And I actually got into medical school quite, I would say quite easily, because my story was more, it wasn't a story, but my experience of doing what I had done had clearly shown commitment to what I was planning to do.
That maths tutor sounds amazing, by the way.
Yeah, I wonder who he was, Ben.
I know Marika has a question for you as we get back to the medical part then. Marika, you wanted to ask something, I think.
I do want to answer it. Sorry, I was just kind of caught up. I think that's a fascinating kind of, your journey is quite fascinating in terms of you kind of, you didn't fail, but you've kind of made a few mistakes and then kind of was happy to go back. And yeah, I think that's really important. for the kids. Okay, what I wanted to know is, you now seem to really, really love your job. What are the pros and the cons of your job? Because everyone likes to talk about the pros and not so much discuss the cons.
Oh, I'll discuss the cons for hours. I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So I may be working in clinical research, but I'm still a doctor. So the cons are that you are still a public servant, and your career is not something that you can, sadly wake up one morning and say, I feel a bit grotty this morning, or I'm not feeling on, or I'm a bit, you have to go in. There are people depending on you, and you can find yourself working in extremely stressful and extremely tiring conditions. And I would say, for anybody who's interested in a career in medicine, and I know it's probably the same for the barristers and the lawyers, you have a immensely committed career, but if the hours are long, I would say working as a doctor is a very tough job in terms of keeping going despite having had limited sleep the night before, having not had a day off for a week, and you can do that for a while, but year on year it is very tiring, and you also have to prioritize your job sometimes ahead of what other people are doing, because you're working the weekend, and you have to be able to deal with the fact that you're working and other people are out having fun.
I think that's really, really important advice around the realities of work. So obviously Matt and I have known each other for a while via tutoring and some of those distracting nights out as well. But I've also been obviously lucky enough to kind of see bits of the work that he does, and really, really wonderful stuff that you contribute to. Long hours. I know during COVID you've also put in quite a shift as well, as has everyone else in the NHS.
Yeah,
so
you pitch in, and you've also everybody knows, but it can really take its toll. And I suppose knowing that although you can have a fulfilling career, that feeling of kind of like I've got a vocation, I have a fulfilling career, can sadly take a back step to I am so tired and this is very, very, very stressful. And that, everyone can cope with that for a short period of time. But when it goes on, when we're talking months and years, it can take its toll. I know that there are lots of careers like this. Medicine is not the only one. There are lots of jobs in public service where this is the case. So it's something to think about very, very carefully, and prioritise if you're thinking about a career in medicine.
Yeah, no, that's really important, to look after oneself.
Thank you, Matt, for your contribution. If you're okay to stick around for a few moments, there's nothing pressing. We're going to bring the other speakers back in. There's been questions for all of you. So, and I think there's some common themes that we've definitely picked up. So if we welcome back in Alea, Kate, and Ranran as well, and then we can ask a few questions of you. Okay, so actually, first of all, I noticed, Kate, there was a couple of things both related to Alea's mention of vacation-related training that's on offer, and obviously Matt talked about volunteering. And I just wondered if you wanted to start, Kate, by talking about the value of those two things. I know you've mentioned that in the background.
Yeah, very much so. I think particularly in my case, because I did an arts degree, and at the time it was very much bashed as you've got very few career options. There were, and they still do exist, vacation placements that are offered by all the medium to large employers, particularly the largest employers in the country, so the likes of Ford, the big petroleum companies, the big FMCG companies, and they will give you 2 months of paid work in engineering, in marketing, potentially in sales, sometimes in HR. And it's a great opportunity to go and find out what those jobs actually are, as opposed to what we tend to think they are without that knowledge. You get a bit of money. Normally they pay for your education. And I am absolutely convinced that was one of the things that helped me when I then started applying for work, because I was able to speak from a position of actual understanding rather than, as I say, hypothesis. And then to Matt's point, volunteering, I can't understate how important it is. There are all sorts of skills. And oftentimes I hear people, particularly young people, say, my CV is empty. I don't have anything to put on it. Of course you don't, because you haven't yet entered the world of work. But volunteering is a great opportunity to learn some of the skills that you will then put into practice when you get into employment. And they are what we call transferable skills. You learn, I think as Alia was saying, you learn how to engage with people, you learn how to influence people, you learn how to build relationships. Those are all vital, irrespective of the profession that you eventually end up in. So if you can find opportunities to volunteer, I would say, go grab them with both hands.
Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
I know a lot of students will be looking at that CV, what makes them stand out, and obviously volunteering. I know when I've looked at CVs, when you spot that, it definitely stands out on an application or a cover letter to see that people are giving up their time in that way. So really bit of useful advice. Okay, we are obviously encouraging students or teachers on behalf of students. Great chance to summarise in the workbooks as we go through some questions. This one for Ranran around architecture. Did you just study architecture in university, or do you need to do some background knowledge?
So I guess if you are thinking about doing an architecture course or a landscape architecture course, I would suggest to maybe have a background knowledge about getting a portfolio together. So because I did business for my bachelor's degree, but then I decided to apply for a master's degree in landscape architecture. The universities asked a portfolio, but that was just my artwork accumulated from just hobby and my minor in studio art back in university and my graphic design. So it doesn't have to be landscape or architecture related per se, but if if you're like building things, or if you like sketching, so maybe just keep record some photos of the work you've done, or if you use like software to do it, just keep them, so later before you apply, you have through the years quite a lot of work already.
I think that portfolio advice is really useful advice for the students and the young people. And I imagine that Kate, you might also have, obviously for photographers that you work with, you'd expect them to have a portfolio if you're going to use them, I assume.
Yeah, very much so. But again, you don't necessarily have to have gone to university to get a photography degree to become a skilled photographer. I mean, many of our photographers have done nothing but's probably the wrong term, but they've learned on the job. They just had a passion for it, and I think all of us have talked about how important that is, probably above anything. If you're going to spend all of the hours out in the cold, and at the moment it's mostly cold, taking pictures that may or may not make it onto a website, then you have to really love it. So taking the time to invest in honing your craft is super important. And then you rely on somebody looking at your portfolio and going, this body of work is impressive. What we do though in our business, because there's increasingly been a level of consciousness that photography is quite white and not as representative as it should be. It's also quite white and quite male. So we have in the last couple of years had internships for photographers. So we had 3 female sport photographers, 2 of whom have ended up being taken on as full-time staff photographers. And I mean, that's a really big deal. Female sport photographers are literally, you could probably number on the fingers of one hand globally. And now we're in the last 6 months, we've hired 6 Black photographers who, because we know that our portfolio in some areas is not as representative of the world that we're supposed to represent. And we are giving them the opportunity to learn on the job. So they had a kind of basic body of work, and now they're going to build it by working for us. So yes, it's super important in those more creative professions.
Thank you so much for that. And also highlighting that lack of diversity. I think for the students watching, sometimes there are certain industries that maybe don't feel like represent them, and there's an opportunity to change that perception?
There is, and I mean, having been for 20 odd years the only brown face, black face in the room, I know how potentially uncomfortable that might feel. But I would really say to anybody on the call who is a person of colour, don't let yourself be held back by what you think other people think of you or might think of you. You know, it's so important that you believe in yourself and you make no apologies for who you are. And if you're interested or passionate about a particular subject or a particular profession, go for it. Absolutely go for it. And you will find out that more and more organizations have started to become aware. God knows it's taken them long enough, I know, but they've started to become aware that the lack of diversity is not just a moral issue, it's a financial issue, because they're not able to speak effectively to millions and millions of people out there who either are consumers or potential customers. And so they need us. Bottom line, they need us. So don't let yourself be held back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Lawrence and I spoke to Rosemary Campbell-Stevens, who writes on this and is using the term global majority to make that point that you've just made. Yeah, a really strong message there to the students as well about, and it's something that came up yesterday, about setting their sights high. So Talani from the Receipts podcast talked about that, and Hannah, who oversees diversity inclusion for Barclays, talked about it as well. And I know Jason from Disney talked about really amplifying sort of creative voices as well. So I'm really pleased that we've got that theme coming through loud and clear, and hopefully the students can start to work sort of move into a world that represents that too. In terms of some of the other questions we've got, so hello, we've got a couple of questions around that route into law and how to become a barrister. So first question for you is, what advice would you give to a student who wishes to follow in this job? So that was posted during your session.
So if you want to become a barrister, I think it probably goes back to get some work experience. Well, actually, the first and fundamental point is get the best grades you can. If you have good grades, you get to have choices. If you don't, you're always going to be fighting to make up for that on your CV, I think. Once you've done that, go and do work experience. And that might mean just emailing law firms and seeing if they'll have you for a couple of weeks, talking to your school's careers advisors, seeing if there are any links to law firms. I think lots of schools do have some links. Or it might mean going to a legal advice clinic and saying, can I sit in on some sessions? Is there anything I can do? Just be a bit creative and be a bit, I guess, fearless is the wrong word, but just ask people. You've got nothing to lose. They may ignore your email, but if 1 out of 10 picks it up, then you gain a bit of experience, and the next time you look a bit more credible when you ask the next person.
Really good advice. And I suppose that kind of then goes some way to answering the next question, which is, what degree do you need to become a barrister?
Right. So I did a law degree, but I would say the profession's probably 50-50, people who did law and people who didn't. Again, do what you find interesting. I thought law was an academically really interesting subject because it covers all sorts of different other subjects, really, but through that kind of legal lens. But if you really want to do a geography degree, go and do a geography degree, get a great grade in that, and then you can apply to be a lawyer later if you want to afterwards.
Awesome. Good to know that there's that split as well. And I think sometimes we get the impression from students that they think that they've got to pick now and get it absolutely right. And obviously sort of Matt, Christine, who said that things do turn out even if you choose a few different degrees along the way. And actually, Matt, on a different scale, there's a question that's come through for you. Tricky one to throw at you, but I hope you don't mind. How have you coped with your mental health during this pandemic?
It's been difficult. I think it's been difficult for everybody. But definitely working I was working on the COVID vaccine trials. I was completely taken away from my job and working on the AstraZeneca vaccine. in its clinical trials. At that point, it was known as the ChAdOx1 nCoV Oxford vaccine. It was and it still is a very stressful time. I think that probably for lots of people on the sidebar there, that if you have a full-on career and you're trying to have any semblance of a life as well, life gets stressful, and so you have to make sure that there is balance in their life. In your life, and part of balance is trying your hardest to sustain meaningful relationships with people and not let your career completely engulf every aspect of your life, because having meaningful relationships with friends, family, loved ones can when you don't come straight home and just talk about what a horror the day was, but actually can share your experiences, and actually if you break down in tears, you've got someone there to talk to, and that can be a sister, an auntie, a significant other, but it's just important to maintain those relationships. And I would say that even in careers that are incredibly impressive, which I've learned a lot about today as well, I would imagine people would say it's important to sustain meaningful relationships. It helps with stress a lot. So just going to the gym and stuff like that. But gyms are closed in the pandemic, so I would say exercise, good. Don't hit high carb foods, but more importantly, meaningful relationships.
I saw some nods along the side as well about that. I think I've learnt a lot over the last few years that in certain situations it's better to say, even if you don't think you're going to say the right thing, to say something to people, open up those conversations and have those conversations is really important. And I know obviously for the students, many of you have had exams removed halfway through your courses, all of that change that you've dealt with. The same goes for yourselves as well. A slightly easier one for you, Matt, just as we finish up. I've given you exactly the same one then.
That's easy because I just answered it. So
this one was obviously you talked about this a little bit, but do you need any background knowledge to be a doctor, or do you learn all you need in university?
So you do need there are requirements. So there are graduate entry. Just like so for the conversion course for law for the CPE and LPC, that if you wanted to go into law, just like a number of vocational professional careers, for becoming a teacher, you can go in as a graduate and without having necessarily had a previous science exposure, and there are foundation courses if you want to take that route. I would say probably that trying to do a medicine degree without having biology and chemistry at A level is pretty difficult, and it limits your choices in terms of universities. And that's why I went back to school because I didn't have the necessary levels, and I could have gone just for graduate entry, but I wanted to have the opportunities that were possible, and going back and actually getting the right A levels. Plus, it's really nice to have like some nice A's at A level that you're able to go back and right some wrongs, and it gave me a good CV. It gave me good exposure to science. I would say that if you do a biology A level and you find it really interesting because you find not necessarily the bug stuff, but like there is human biology A level and you're interested in them and some of the kind of functions of the pancreas, whilst everyone else is kind of, thinking, gosh, this isn't particularly interesting. You're like, oh no, but it makes all these enzymes and they're all incredibly important. And things go wrong with them. If that's the sort of thing that's interesting you, then you've chosen the right thing. And I think we heard before, interest in the subject matter is the most important thing. And absolutely interest in the subject matter for me was the most important thing. And I didn't have interest in the subject matter until I did a psychology degree, that I was like, I'm so interested in what happens when things go wrong. And it was that kick-started that. So yes, it was. You don't have to. There is foundation courses. There is graduate entry. I had lots of people who've done history degrees in my course. People who've done law degrees. But I would say probably paying attention in class and choosing kind of science A levels with biology and chemistry is the conventional, traditional route, which was not my route. But I want to show you that there are other routes.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of motivated young people who get the experience, go straight from school to university to do medicine. Obviously, you did a degree and then came in at that point. So there's a couple of options.
And also, can I just say on the volunteering point, it's incredibly difficult to get volunteering in healthcare sector on account of the fact that there, because we have, you have to have vetting procedures and limited amounts beforehand, and it is really sad. But when I look in, I've sat on interview panels for medicine for many, many years. Volunteering in something that is pastoral, that shows commitment and discipline, that you're committed to what you were doing, which was, I used the word pastoral there, that's something to do with, helping other people along, that, helping, it doesn't matter. I worked in I was part of a charity that for children from kind of you had less advantages in their backgrounds. You don't have to be following your best mate's dad who's like a GP or something. Doing something that shows actually you kept to something, and that it involved actually being committed to a kind of a caring profession, something where you actually were involved in helping other people, was, and it really could be as simple as, homework clubs and things like that, but they like showing signs of commitment and determination.
Can I make I would totally agree with what Matt's just said. Can I make another point just on the pandemic? And this is absolutely not to in any way underplay, particularly the challenges that the people in the NHS have faced. I think once we come out of this, and when the young people on this call start to think about writing CVs and applying for jobs, it's worth reflecting on what did you learn from this experience. And the things that, I realise, and I talk to my team about, is that we've learned that we're resilient, that we are flexible, that we're adaptable, more flexible and more adaptable than we ever thought that we were. We're probably more resilient than we ever thought we were. And those are skills that will never not be useful. So, as I say, it's not to downplay what has been a horrible time, and for some people, a really, really horrible time. But I do think that there are things that we've all learnt about each other that, as I say, will stand us in good stead in the future.
Here. And I think for the students who've been learning from home for periods of time. Actually, we were reflecting yesterday that if you are a year 10 student watching this at the moment, the last time you did a full year in person at school was year 8. It's a pretty incredible thing to comprehend. And if we think about our year 8 self versus our year 10 self, a lot can change in that time. So yeah, I think you've probably picked up a load of skills that you don't realise as well as going through that. Thank you so much to everyone for your contributions. I think we've had some amazing themes come up of volunteering, that summer vacation work, building relationships, and lots of things for the students to reflect on. Obviously, for the students using the workbook, try and get as much of that down as you can. Are you ready to go and search for Getty images or for landscape related architecture information from those links, and all of the different things that you've seen? We hope that you've got a few bits of inspiration to go away and explore new things. So thank you again to all of our speakers. We really appreciate your time. Obviously, this is a working day that you've put aside, and I'm sure Matt's got to run to some patients and pick up on things that are left over. I'm sure that Ranran's got a lot of projects and emails and meetings that have been rescheduled because of this. And similarly, Kate, I know you've got Australia meetings and New York meetings and the rest to come too. So really appreciate everyone's contributions, and just a massive thank you from us and the students. Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Put that back in briefly there. So with the closing of this session, it just leaves me to remind you, we'd love your feedback. So teachers and students and speakers, if they're still watching, we'd love your feedback via that link. Don't forget to continue asking questions today and throughout the week and into tomorrow for those vouchers. So one of 6 £50 Amazon vouchers available for those people really contributing. And we will be back at, I want to say 11:30, but I'm just going to double check.
Yes.
Yes, we're back at 11:30. So look out for the links that you've been sent, either teachers or students if you signed up individually. 11:30, we're going to be talking about applying for apprenticeships. So we've got Dexter, Akeem, Alona, and Naomi, who have all got really good experience with apprenticeships, and they can really tell you what they are, how you can get onto apprenticeship schemes. And the great thing about apprenticeship schemes is it's learning and working at the same time. So learning on the job, a paycheck as you learn, and a great opportunity to get into some really interesting organisations through apprenticeships. So we hope you can join us at 11:30 for that. It will be available on demand afterwards if you can't make that slot, so you can catch up on it later. And obviously we encourage you throughout the week to pause, reflect in your workbooks, and let us know how we're getting on via the feedback. It's been awesome working with you this morning. Quite amazingly, I think I've hit the timing spot on, which is not necessarily my strong point. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. We'll hopefully see you at 11:30 and then at 1:30 for Build a CV and writing a cover letter, where we have got Lauren from Google, who's going to be helping you with that. So lots of great people to come. Hopefully see you soon. Cheers.
Bye.